Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check out this video today. And guys, I want to talk about a period in my bass fishing career where I fished the same lure for over 90% of the time. For 3 years in a row, 90% of the days that I went out there, maybe more, maybe 95% of the days, this is the only lure that I had tied on. And I want to talk about what happened during this 3-year period when I just fished this. And after that 3-year period, I incorporated it into my fishing, at sort of like probably 50% of the time. But it's really interesting what happened during that 3-year process that I fished it for 90+% of the time. I want to go over that in today's episode. Also, guys, just a big thank you before we get started. I want to thank everybody who's taking time to check out and use that Tackle Warehouse link of mine in the description. Right now, they've got that sale going on. That Abu Garcia Zata tack reel that helps benefit our first responders and our retired military. If you guys are interested in picking up one of those Zata tack reels that I've been talking about, I'll link it in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of the video. It's a good way to give back to good cause and get you a good bait cast reel at the same time there. Okay, guys, there was a period. Now, this was during 1983, 1984, and 1985. In 1980, I believe it was 1982. Yeah, I think it was 1982. I had a chance to learn about flipping for the first time. I had a chance to fish with what I think is probably the best bass fisherman, one of the best bass fishermen in the history of the sport. Without a doubt, the best flipper. That was Terry Thomas here in Missouri. He taught me how to flip, taught me how to win tournaments flipping, and he got me where all I did was flip. That was it. And I had a flipping stick. I had 30-pound clear blue strand line, and I had a ½ ounce. At the time, it was a basil bacon super jig, black basil bacon super jig, with either a black pork chunk, #1 pork chunk, or a blue pork chunk. That's all I had. That's all I fished with. 30-pound test line, high vis, flipping stick, jig and frog. That was it. And during that course of that period there, guys, I won more tournaments here locally and regionally than I probably did my entire career. That's all I did. I qualified for the Redman All-American, which is now the BFL All-American with that technique. I won my first Redman tournament with it, won a bunch of buddy tournaments, here in Missouri with it. And that's the only technique that I fished. And the thing about that is I didn't try anything else because I had so much confidence in that lure that it didn't matter where I fished at around here. It's like, I don't care what lake it was, I would go to that lake and I would look for the type of water in that lake that I knew I could catch them on my jig with. It's like there may be, some lakes may have had more than others, some less than others, but I would go to that area and that's where I would fish with my jig, and I'd put it in my hand and not take it out. Sometimes, I'd get 5 bites in a day. Sometimes I get 50 bites in a day, just depending upon the situation. And eventually what happened during the course of that period is it put me in the type of water in the lakes that was in the upper extremities, like the upper river portions and the back of the creeks, areas that were tight and small. And as I got successful and started doing well, and some other anglers caught on wind with it, everybody started doing that. Everybody started running to the extremities and flipping a jig. And eventually here in Missouri and some parts of Oklahoma, where I also did good in some tournaments, eventually those waters they just got fished out because everybody was running up there, dragging those fish all the way back down the lake. And, like they'd run up the James River at Table Rock, drag the fish back down. They'd run up the river at Lake of the Ozark, drag the fish back down, run up the river at Beaver Lake, drag the fish back down the lake. And eventually those fish got relocated to the lower end of the lake. And that started a downward spiral in that particular technique. And as the years went on, I had to diversify, and I still use that technique a lot. In fact, both of the Bassmaster Top 100s I won were with a big jig like that, with a frog on it, with a pork frog. But I had to get more specific with how I caught them. And of course, the train goes by, guys. Just right on clue with the video here. You guys are talking about that, unbelievable. But it sort of leads to the bigger picture of what I really want to talk about in this video. If you want to do good in bass fishing, and especially if you want to catch big bags of fish and you want to win tournaments, you have got to be a specialist at the technique that you're using. Very, very seldom do people that are versatile in bass fishing win a lot of tournaments. If you look back historically, before spotlighting ruined the sport of bass fishing, everybody that was a consistent winner and they won a lot of tournaments, they had one or two techniques they were masters at. It would be David Fritz with deep cranking. It would be Rick Clunn with the square bill crankbait. It would be Denny Brower flipping and pitching a jig. You know, it'd be Zell rolling with a pop-R. When they got on that particular water and that bite was going on, they were unbeatable. And a lot of those guys made a career. They would suck in 2 or 3 of the tournaments a year because they try to force feed them their favorite bait, but they would do so well in those other tournaments when it lined up great that it carried them through that. So in bass fishing, one of the things you have to do is you have to make this determination and this decision. Do you want to be consistent and catch lots of smaller fish, or do you want to win tournaments, do well, place high in tournaments, and bomb out sometimes? And, you know, high risk, high reward type of a deal. One of the things that I found in fishing, you can't hardly make a living in consistency. It's like you might be able to barely pay your bills, but you're never going to have any type of a windfall profit through fishing. The only way that you can have a windfall profit fishing, tournament-wise, and win a lot of money is you've got to master 1 or 2 techniques, and you've got to win tournaments doing that. That's the only way that you can succeed. So I tried to do that as much as I possibly could, but in my situation, sometimes I had to just fish to try to get a check because I didn't have money. And I didn't have the luxury of just gambling all the time. Like some guys that had a financial safety net, they were in a position where they could gamble because they knew that they were going to fish the next tournament. They knew they were going to get money from their family or whatever. I didn't have that. So I tried as hard as I could to stay with those big fish techniques as much as I possibly could, but at some point I had to bail out. And this was really evident to me back in the early 90s because Tommy Biffle was a prime example, or Danny Brower. We always wound up in the same water, like the upper river part or the back of the creeks together fishing. And a lot of times what would happen is we'd all be fishing, and say at 11:30 in the morning, none of us were doing any good. Maybe we all had 1 or 2 fish. I would bail out because I said I have got to catch a limit of fish so I don't fall out of the classic standings, or I don't fall out of the check range. I've just got to get a limit somehow. And I'd bail out and go do something else to catch a limit. Those dudes would stay up there, and they'd get 2 or 3 more bites that would weigh 4 pounds apiece and wind up finishing in the top 10 in the tournament because they had the balls to do that. Or maybe they had the safety net, I don't know. But that's sort of like one of the things you don't hear much about in tournament fishing is those decision-making processes like that. But anyway, I just wanted to share that story with you guys. That was a very memorable 3-year period. It was super fun too because it was so easy. I'd go out, I'd have 2 flipping sticks again on the deck. That's all I'd have, just in case I broke one. Both of them with that high vis string line on there with those big jigs, and just go out in there and whacking on hogs, man, flipping. It was fun time in fishing. So hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll talk later.